Immigration and border security, the Great Migration in reverse. Trump's 2025 immigration plan is back and bigger than ever. Think mass deportations, more border walls, and a crackdown on asylum seekers. First, the deportation blitz. Trump promises the largest removal operation in U.S. history, targeting millions of undocumented immigrants. Great news for those who want stricter enforcement. But businesses relying on immigrant labor, like farms and restaurants, might feel the squeeze. Plus, expect legal battles galore as civil rights groups gear up for courtroom showdowns. Then, there's the wall, extended edition. More border barriers and thousands of troops patrolling the U.S.-Mexico border? Sounds dramatic, but history shows smuggling tactics evolve faster than government policies. Anyone remember those catapults? Also, get ready for a hefty taxpayer bill. Walls don't build themselves, despite what Lego taught us. And finally, asylum and travel bans are back. Restrictions on certain Muslim-majority countries and stricter asylum policies mean fewer refugees finding safety in the U.S. Supporters call it national security. Critics call it a humanitarian crisis. Either way, international allies won't be thrilled. Love it or loathe it, this immigration overhaul will shake up communities, industries, and America's image on the world stage. One thing's for sure, this debate isn't ending anytime soon. Economic and trade policies, tariffs, tax cuts, and the return of America first. Trump's economic game plan is as bold as ever. Tariffs on imports, tax cuts for workers, and a renewed push for domestic energy dominance. Whether this fuels an economic boom or just burns a hole in consumers' wallets is the big question. First up, universal tariffs. Trump wants a baseline 10% to 20% tax on all imported goods, aiming to boost American manufacturing. Sounds patriotic, but here's the catch. Higher import costs usually mean higher prices for consumers. That shiny new iPhone? Expect it to cost more. Walmart groceries? Yep, those too. While some industries might thrive, others, especially ones relying on global supply chains, could feel the pinch. Then, tax cuts. Workers can expect lower income taxes and, get this, no federal taxes on tips. A win for service industry folks. But where will the government make up for lost revenue? Tariffs, perhaps? Either way, this move is sure to be a crowd pleaser for waiters and bartenders everywhere. Lastly, drill baby, drill. Trump plans to boost fossil fuel production, roll back climate regulations, and pump more oil on U.S. soil. Good news for the energy sector, but bad news for environmentalists and clean energy advocates. So, will this plan supercharge the economy, or just leave Americans paying more for everyday goods? One thing's certain, your wallet will feel it one way or another. Education and social policies, schools out for the federal government, Trump's 2025 education vision, less Washington, more local control, and a curriculum shakeup that's making waves. If you're a fan of school choice, this might sound like a dream. If you like federal education programs, well, buckle up. First, the Department of Education is on the chopping block. Trump wants to dismantle it completely, shifting power to states. Supporters say this means more flexibility for parents and teachers. Critics argue it could lead to inconsistent education standards and fewer protections for marginalized students. Either way, the future of federal education funding? Let's just say it's looking shaky. Next, curriculum changes. Trump wants to eliminate funding for schools that teach critical race theory or gender ideology and instead promote patriotic education. What that actually looks like is still up for debate, but expect intense political fights over what kids should learn in history class. And then there's school choice, a major push to let parents use public funds for private, charter, or religious schools. Proponents say it empowers families. Opponents worry it weakens public schools by draining resources. Bottom line, this education overhaul could reshape the way kids learn in America. Whether for better or worse, depends on where you stand. Healthcare and social services? Cutting costs or cutting care? Trump's healthcare vision is all about less government involvement, fewer regulations, and some major shakeups to federal programs. Whether this makes healthcare more affordable or just more chaotic depends on how it all plays out. First, Medicare and Medicaid reforms. Trump wants to cut federal spending on these programs, particularly targeting anything related to gender-affirming care and certain social services. Supporters see this as fiscal responsibility. Critics argue it could leave vulnerable populations without necessary care. If you rely on government health care, expect potential changes in coverage and eligibility. Then there's Obamacare, again. Trump has long promised to repeal or replace the Affordable Care Act, though details remain fuzzy. Will healthcare premiums drop? Maybe. Will millions lose coverage? Also maybe. Either way, expect another round of political brawls over pre-existing conditions, insurance mandates, and government subsidies. On the plus side, lower regulations on drug pricing and insurance could mean cheaper medications and more coverage options. But without federal oversight, the quality and accessibility of those options might be a gamble. So, is this a step toward healthcare freedom or just a prescription for confusion? Either way, if you weren't paying attention to healthcare policy before, now's a good time to start. Foreign policy and national security. Tough talk, tougher moves. Trump's foreign policy is back with a vengeance. More tariffs, tougher immigration laws, and a don't mess with us military stance. If diplomacy were a sport, this would be the heavyweight division. First up, trade wars, again. Trump wants to hit China with higher tariffs and cut U.S. dependence on foreign manufacturing. Sounds great for American industry, until you realize tariffs make everyday goods more expensive. Want a cheap smartphone or car? Better start saving. Then, there's military intervention, Trump style. He's floated sending U.S. troops into Mexico to fight drug cartels, a move that sounds straight out of an action movie. Supporters say it's necessary to combat fentanyl trafficking, but Mexico? Not thrilled. Diplomacy could get complicated. And let's talk NATO and international alliances. Trump has hinted again that if allies don't pay up, the U.S. might scale back commitments or even leave NATO altogether. Critics fear this could weaken global stability, while supporters say America shouldn't foot the bill for everyone else's security. So, what's the takeaway? America First is back, but at what cost? Whether this approach makes the U.S. stronger or isolates it on the world stage remains to be seen. Environmental and energy policies, drill now, ask questions later. Trump's 2025 energy plan is simple. More oil, less regulation, and a big goodbye to green energy subsidies. If you're in the fossil fuel industry, pop the champagne. If you're an environmentalist, maybe sit down for this one. First, domestic drilling is going full throttle. Trump wants to expand oil and gas drilling on public lands, roll back Biden-era climate policies, and reduce environmental restrictions. Supporters say this means cheaper gas and energy independence. Critics warn it's a fast track to environmental disaster. Then, there's the war on renewables. Federal incentives for wind and solar, likely gone. Climate agreements, probably out the window. While fossil fuels get a boost, clean energy companies may lose federal support, which could slow innovation and keep the U.S. behind in the global green energy race. And of course, climate change? Not exactly a priority. Trump has long dismissed aggressive climate policies, focusing instead on economic growth over emissions reduction. Whether that means jobs or just more pollution depends on your perspective. So, is this a path to energy dominance or just doubling down on an outdated model? Either way, one thing's clear. The U.S. is about to get a whole lot oilier. Judicial and political reforms, draining the swamp. Again? Trump is back with big plans to reshape the federal government. And this time, he's aiming straight at the deep state. Expect bureaucratic shakeups, stricter voting laws, and a loyalty test for government workers. First, civil service reform. Trump wants to purge federal agencies of so-called deep state actors. Basically, government employees he believes are working against his agenda. His plan? Make it easier to fire them. Supporters call it a necessary cleanup. Critics say it's just a way to fill agencies with loyalists instead of career professionals. Then, there's election integrity. Trump has promised stricter voter ID laws, proof of citizenship requirements, and a crackdown on mail-in ballots. The goal? Prevent election fraud. The concern? It could make voting harder, especially for certain communities. And finally, the Supreme Court question. While he hasn't explicitly called for changes, expect more conservative judges if any seats open up. Given his past judicial picks, this could reshape U.S. law for decades. So, is this government accountability or just political score settling? One thing's certain, Washington is in for another wild ride. To keep learning about all sorts of topics, subscribe to our channel. Want us to cover any particularly juicy topics? Comment below.